great for you guys to introduce yourself. Yeah, what are you working on? We can start.
Okay, hi everyone. I just realized I look a bit like Palmer Luckey with this t-shirt. Um, so I'm Emmy. I'm one of the co-founders of the Crecimiento movement that is pushing on-chain adoption in Argentina. And I stopped being the director a few months ago to focus on Civic Stack, which is building on-chain infrastructure for different types of jurisdictions.
Hello, everyone. I'm Joel. I'm one of the co-founders of Prufold Labs. We're a brand new company that's just literally we incorporated like 2 weeks ago, I think. However, we bring a lot of experience to the table, and basically we're building the cryptographic layer, trust layer for the autonomous economy. So think AI, governments, critical infrastructure. And, cryptography is something that I think in this room and in this space, everybody understands really well. But you get out of this space and it's not so well. But how do we apply those same guardrails to things like AI so that things like what happened last week where, Anthropic was used to, hack into companies, things like that don't happen. Because at the moment it's a bit of, hey, let's trust these companies. And I think everyone here would probably agree that we should do a little less trusting and ask for a little more proofs. So that's what we're building. My background is I'm a multi-time founder. My last company, I was based in Mexico for a few years. It was a Y Combinator company, but now starting something new that I think is super important for the future.
Cool. So, Emmy, I know you are in the civic infrastructure space, and I think one thing we talk about all the time is, okay, we can rebuild these systems, but so much of it is also like having new mental models so that we don't make the same mistakes over again. And part of that is like privacy and DAC, as you know. So like, what's sort of your position and your take on it as you start to like build these new types of infrastructure?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's pretty difficult. I guess it depends. Like, I've been talking to different type of jurisdictions of different sizes, and a lot of times with a lot of the infrastructure for the government, you can't just replace. So if you think about property registries, for example, those tend to be a problem where you have like garbage in, garbage out. So let's say if we want to put the Palermo neighborhoods on chain, I can do a transfer that is super anonymous in the blockchain and everything you want to another person. But if the local courts decide to bring that back because there's a impending litigation in a separate courthouse, then that suddenly it's not valid. So like when the systems are very big and complicated, it's difficult to just copy and paste a new technology on top of it. I think smaller jurisdictions like what's happening in Prospera or countries like Uruguay or some of the provinces within Argentina, not the national government, might be easier to experiment at the beginning and try to find that specific use cases that crypto, Web3, whatever it is, does better to then scale it out.
I mean, is it like an education thing though, when it comes to because we have all of the primitives to like satisfy the constraints of the government, and I guess why they typically don't opt for privacy at like their database level is because, if shit hits a fan, they need to be able to go find that information and know who's responsible, who to give consequences to. And so I'm just wondering, like, is it an education thing for them to understand that, okay, you could still do that while maintaining privacy along the way?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a big part of it. But I think most, governments, if you ask them, how important is privacy? Everyone's going to say, of course, yeah, that's fundamental to democracy, right? But how do you get all these different stakeholders to agree and work together in governments? I mean, I think that's like fundamentally difficult in most places in the world, anyways. So again, yeah, it has to be education, but then it's like, okay, everyone, let's work together and solve this. The technology's there, like you said. It's a matter of implementing it and across different agencies and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I think it's counterintuitive in sometimes. Like if you take a country like Argentina, just as an example, this is not some personal conversations that I've had, but you have a big part of the economy that's under the table, right? And you have the technology to recognize that transactions are being made under the table and to stop that. But if you prevent that at scale, you basically destroy the economy, right? So you can't really. So in those cases, for governments, privacy is actually really good because they can provide services while not necessarily saying, I can see something bad happen. And in other cases, like a public, I don't know what the word is for licitación, but like a public, when you want to build a bridge and you say, give me bits for who wants to. Those are cases where privacy, it's maybe they don't necessarily want because there's a level of corruption. So it's understanding these use cases to understand where to implement them.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess like I do think it's inevitable that AI enters like the government space, like native to governments. And how are you guys thinking about like guardrails and security when it comes to that? Because if we have AI in such critical infrastructure, like we need to be able to have like, you know, a lot of verifiability along that pathway.
I mean, that's what we're trying out to solve, right? Because I mean, there's in my mind, anyways. I don't think anyone would deny it. I mean, AI is definitely going to be a part of pretty much everything. Um, but I don't think that privacy layer has been built in from from the ground up, how as it should be. Again, we have to trust rather than, prove. It's like, building a bridge and then like, all right, let's drive some trucks over it and see if it holds. And oh, look, let's put a bigger truck over it and see if it holds. Okay, this is good to go. Rather than like, okay, let's use math here and let's make some calculations and look, this actually will hold up to this amount. But so we have to start yesterday, thinking about that. But again, it can't just be a patch on later because that never really works out very well. And I think that that's how most governments think about it. It's like, let's build a system to do this. And then, oh, wait, we have to be compliant. So let's, duct tape this and this and this. And okay, now we're compliant. We can check that box off. But it wasn't part of the design principles from the beginning. And that's why it usually doesn't work very well.
And that's why you have all those databases that are just like, all right, well, we can't fix everyone, so this is what it is.
Yeah, and you have like these databases, and then you have these different agencies, and they need different permissions, and maybe you start with this, and over time there's creep on that, right? And all of a sudden, oh, we need this permission now too, and then at some point you don't have any idea of the Frankenstein that's out there, and let alone trying to think about, oh wait, how do we go back and retrofit this, uh, proof layer to it? It's tough.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Just reminded me, like, this is comment by Peter Thiel when PayPal was launched that he was saying PayPal, if it was created 2 years afterwards, it wouldn't have been able to exist because there was enough regulation that got in place that prevented sending money over the email, but they got so big that suddenly it was a thing. So I think privacy and confidentiality by default is something that the entire industry we should all just be pushing for because we're in that moment of time that thing could go either way. So the more that we push for privacy and for our rights, especially given in context, it's difficult for me to think and tell you what AI is going to do because the landscape in 5 years is something that I can't really process what it could be capable of. Having cryptography as the guardrails and the walls that AI also has to obey by, I think is very important, and giving more sovereignty to each jurisdiction as well because like in a way, when the internet was launched, you would think that the internet was going to become this separate jurisdiction from the physical world. But in reality, what happened is that if I want to create a company and issue shares in Argentina online, I have to abide by the jurisdiction of the US, of Europe, of so many different things, and gives you a mental cost and actual cost that is super expensive. But if Argentina can have a specific jurisdiction that's anonymous that says Argentinian citizens can issue it, and if you're from the US, you can't. That also gives you a possibility of experimentation, of competition of jurisdictions, and sovereignty.
What's like the what's the argument towards like if a government person kind of says that, I mean, the only people who care about privacy is like, some criminal or something. It's just like the argument they always use. Um, what's your take on that? Like,
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
as in, like, what is the argument to governments when they come and say that, okay, people who care about privacy are usually the ones who are doing something shady or whatever, and you shouldn't care about, like, you shouldn't have to care, they shouldn't have to care about it for you.
Like for me, the experience that I've had, like pitching to different regulators and politicians, what resonates more is actually the increase in efficiency of being able to say, I don't know, I have X number of citizens that have companies, and um, like some project like Aave or something like that can open loans automatically for every company that is part of Argentina that meets certain criteria and they don't have the information on who they are, like the economic benefit and output that that can create. That has been normally the thing that's positive, but also you never know. Like I was the other day talking to someone explaining the digital special economic zone, and he was like, yeah, but I need something physical to showcase. It's like, it doesn't need one. It's like, but can you put like a server or something for the picture?
Data center.
And it's like, okay, we could put a server if you want. So yeah, it varies.
Interesting. I mean, like, one thing could also be like, I'm trying to meme a term into existence here, like privacy sovereignty. Like how we have like data sovereignty, and that's like a huge thing right now because data centers, like we're in like the information age, and the only thing that matters is where that data is hosted. And so every country is trying to figure out, okay, how can we build local data centers so that we don't depend on like the AWSs of the world, and so we de-risk ourselves. So probably there is something there of like privacy sovereignty, as like we talk about cyber militaries and these like types of things. You have to be able to defend against that, and you literally can't do it without these privacy technologies.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the problems is that a lot of most governments, I think, know the need for privacy. It's not hard to convince them of that, but it's actually designing a system that works. And there's let's be honest, there's not a whole lot of deep experts, cryptographers in the world. Yeah, I mean, I would say there's probably hundreds, perhaps. So how do you, as a government, get that kind of talent? And let's be honest, most people who do have that kind of technical ability are probably not gonna. Yeah, you want to go work for a government and make, half the salary and fight with committees all day, and hopefully in a couple of years you'll get something passed. And nobody wants to do that, right? So there's this scarcity for the actual skill that's needed to build these things a lot. So I think that's one of the big challenges too. Yeah, I mean, which is kind of what we're trying to solve too. And I think probably a lot of people here is how do we kind of democratize, how do we make these tools really easy so that, they can work with governments and other critical kind of infrastructure to build them.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think privacy is just so much better. It's just so much better. And like when you have crypto that allows you to move value around, that just opened the floodgates for competition and regulations and jurisdictions worldwide. And when you want to sell somewhere, you're not going to pick the one that is a little bit best. You're going to just pick the best, And right now it's like Delaware and UI and Dubai and whichever one is the jurisdiction that offers privacy by default. That's where people are going to park capital and stuff. And just Europe is going to be complicated for a bit, but generally it just makes sense and wins in the long term. And there's nothing you can do, like, in my opinion.
That's why they're all moving to Dubai.
Yeah, until someone else adds privacy in their jurisdiction and then starts competing with Dubai.
Exactly. I guess if you were to like rebuild civic infrastructure from the ground up, how would you do so with privacy embedded at what specific layers is most critical to you from your understanding of the infrastructure?
I mean, I think identity and finance, those are probably the most critical to start with. Um, but again, you have to make it, yeah, and you have to make it provable and not just this thing where you have to trust that somebody built this system in a way that works and it's not, leaking information or anything like that. But you have to build it, which again, everyone here I think is big believers in this. That's why we're here. But how do we get outside of, you know, the fairly small circle of Web3 and start applying this stuff at massive scale, which is what's needed, right? And we have to make it really simple. We have to make, like you said, people want to see something. It's hard to show, these things working. So how do you build like dashboards that kind of visualize something, even though it's a little bit of bullshit, but like, whoa, I can visualize it now. I see what's happening. Sometimes you got to do that kind of stuff. But we have to make it easy for people to understand what's going on and understand why the way that it has been done just doesn't work. And I think, the news helps us with that because every week there's something that comes out that's like, this was hacked or that was hacked or all of this information. Well, the problem with data is once it's like gone, you can't like bring it back in. It's gone. It's out there. So yeah, sorry, I'm kind of like rambling around, but
No, I get it. I'm going to do a reverse Unicode and ask you that question, and then I'll reply.
Um, I think it's definitely along the lines of like identity, but also just the database structure and how the information is stored. That plays like a key role in it. Um, and then before I even before you get to the infrastructure, I would spend like a significant amount of time creating like not a coalition, but like a committee of people who are like dedicated to only thinking about how do we ensure that this is embedded alongside like in every bit of infrastructure. Because generally someone is good at a specific thing and then they don't really have the headspace to think about this other thing, but you always need to be thinking about that as you build. So I think it's just like the committee structure and the collaboration between the stakeholders that are, that are working together to bring it to life.
no, I was just going to add, I think like what you're building, we need more things like that. But in talking with Kim earlier, we were talking about how, when you first hear about the idea of Onchain City, you're thinking, well, but how are you going to get all of these different governments to cooperate and to like, build this in? And that just seems like almost impossible. But you have to build things in the way that Kim is thinking about it, where you're, okay, at the first step, we don't need them. We can use AI and agents to do the work for somebody, but we don't actually have to. We can use their existing systems, but with the help of AI to do it. Of course, we have to put some good guardrails around this to make sure that it's working that way. But I think that's how we have to often attack this: is not needing them to do as little as possible, because getting them to do anything is really difficult. So the more that we can do it all ourselves, it's going to be much more efficient.
Actually, sorry, just before you go on, just because I will forget this example, but I think the stablecoins example is a really good reference point. We built stablecoins to the point where like, governments kind of ignored it for a large part, and then they realized, whoa, this thing is too big, so now we have to get involved. And so it's like building the thing that people use until like they take you seriously, and then they're like, okay, fine. Like we'll regulate it.
Yeah, 100%. I agree, and I think everything related to mobility that's happening right now with visas is like the next, like you're saying, stablecoin concept. Everything around identity, all of this technology, basically, and going to the point of how you would restructure it from the beginning. I guess I would put throughout the time, like the social contract for trusting someone got up the ladder so much, and you need these big institutions that, for example, give you a passport to prove. I mean, my great grandfather is Italian, therefore I can enter Europe, and I have friends that are Argentine that cannot enter Europe. Now they can, but they couldn't a few years ago. So the system of that validation is completely broken. So anything that makes the system more granular, being able to say that I have X amount of reputation, therefore I am this. I think this should be the key in every aspect of the conversation.
Awesome. Well, we need privacy and we're all working on it. So thank you. One thing I'd like to, I know some of the Edge City people are here. Shout out to them. I think the CPR guys, the Citizenship Protocol Residency, they have done this newspaper called Flyaway, and one of the headlines and something that we wrote for it is a fictional headline of what we think the future could look like, looking backwards. And that headline is the UAE abolishes passport requirements and uses contextual graph. So we think it's possible, and they'll be giving out some of the papers tomorrow at one of the hubs in DevConnect. So check them out. Yeah, thank you guys.
Thanks, Kim. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.